now looking around the table, blinds are 200, 400. Everyone's still pretty deep stacked. And that's how all the Global Poker League games work. There's a reasonable amount of time of deep stack poker. Ace-4 offsuit's a very loose open. I would definitely not open this. If you use a program, Equilab actually can suggest some pre-flop ranges. Right here, you click on no limit. Then you go down to full ring, actually short-handed, let's say loose opens from under the gun. He's under the gun, right? Yeah, under the gun 5-handed. So that's MP3. And you see that Ace-4 offsuit's like nowhere near the playable range, right? It's just way down here. It actually doesn't even suggest Ace-4 suited. And that's because the hands are bad, and you have to fade a lot of people. On the previous hand, from the previous section, what do you think about what should Dimitri bet on the river if he had a full house? Well, I think he should actually bet kind of big. He's trying to get called by trips and straights. So I think that's a spot where a pretty big bet makes sense. Maybe not an insanely big bet. Maybe just nearly pot, something like that. His bet size was tailored to try to get called by middle pair in that scenario with his hand. Check shove, bet big. He could not check shove because he was in position, I believe. Yeah, he was in position. He raised under the gun. Oh, you're saying... let's go back to the hand. A little bit confused. All right, so yeah, he is out of position. I think he should bet big if he has a full house. Yeah, he should probably bet big if he has a full house. It's hard to rewind on this video player. All right, so on this flop, Dimitri checks, Zhang bets, Dimitri check raises. Pretty sweet. Pretty sweet. Let's take a look at this hand in Flopzilla. Why not? Board is Queen of Hearts, 7 of clubs, 3 of clubs. 7 of clubs, 3 of clubs. Our hand in question is 10, 8 of spades. Not a particularly good hand on this board. And now we have to give Zhang a pre-flop raising range. He has Ace-4 offsuit in the range. It's not what I would expect, but let's try to make this realistic as if he has Ace-4 offsuit in the range. What is the opening if he has Ace-4 offsuit? What other hands make logical sense? Yeah, no backdoor spades. Feels bad, man. I agree. All right, so if you're opening Ace-4 offsuit, you're probably opening all of these, if I had to guess. We are purely guessing. So he's opening all these. Which of these will he continuation bet on Queen 7-3, 2 clubs? So this is where you want to start taking out some hands because he may not bet with all of those. So would he continuation bet with the Queen? Probably. Would he continuation bet with Jacks? Probably. I mean, we can look at this from 2 different ways. Let's just assume he continuation bets everything because that's just what he does. If that's just what he does on this board, he's going to bet with all of it. What is he going to call the check raise with? Will he call with middle pair? Ace-7 and 8-7. Probably. Weak pair, probably not. Ace-high, definitely not. No made hand. Flush draw, yes. So yeah, in this scenario, he's going to call the check raise only 31% of the time. So here, let's try to get out a calculator. Oh, that button's not working. Come on, computer, you can do it. No, can't do it. Give the computer a second. Handy dandy calculator. One second. There we go. The magical calculator. So he is putting in 2,500 chips to try to win 2,800. So the way you figure out how often this bet needs to work is you do 25 plus 28 equals, and then you do 25 divided by 53. 25 divided by 53 equals. So this bluff needs to work 47% of the time. So looking at this, this tells us right here, his bluff is going to work 70% of the time because his opponent's only going to call with 70. He's going to fold 70% of the time. He's going to call with 31% of the hands. So given the opponent's going to fold 70% of the time, and our bluff only needs to work 47% of the time, it's a very clear, easy check raise. And this is a spot where I think a lot of people do not check raise, ever, with 10-8 suited. And I don't, honestly. If I'm sitting here with 10-8 suited, unless I have a good read, I'm not going to check raise. But knowing that Zhang is opening too wide, you can crush him pretty hard. What program is this? This program is called Flopzilla. I believe it costs $30 or something like that, but it is well worth the price if you want to study poker. All right, let's instead assume now that Zhang is opening reasonably normal. Well, let's actually use the poker strategy range that I just suggested from under the gun. I'll type it in exactly as they suggest. This is the loose raising range they suggest. I think that you should probably be a little bit tighter. Let's see. Why don't we use better equity when check raising? Do you check raise any bluff here? Well, yeah. I mean, I would be check raising here with hands like... Let's go back to the screen real quick. I'd be check raising hands like a 6-5, any 6-5 I have, I would check raise for sure. Any hand like 10-8 of clubs, I would be check raising. So I think that, yeah, I'm check raising here sometimes as a bluff, but I think, I thought this one's a little bit too bad, but it doesn't matter because, like we saw, that your opponent's going to be folding too often. All right, let's go back to Flopzilla. All right, now, even against a strongish, standard-ish range, you see that the opponent's still going to fold. Well, opponent's only going to call 37% of the time. This means they're sticking around about 62%. It means they're calling, I can't speak. They're calling 38%, they're folding 62%. So is 62% higher than 47? It absolutely is. So still a pretty sweet check raise versus even a standard-ish range. Let's make it even a little bit tighter. Maybe we think the opponent is pretty snug. You see, it doesn't really change a lot because a lot of these hands have, I mean, I guess there's just such a small portion of the range where it doesn't really matter. Carlos says he's amazed at how wide these guys go in tough fields. Well, what this really amounts to is if Zhang starts calling with weak pairs and ace high, now the check raise becomes bad, right? But is anyone really calling here with ace 10 on this board when check raise? And the answer is just no. No one's calling with ace 10. So whenever you know the board should be quite clean, meaning like the opponent just can't have anything, these are pretty good spots to get after it. And this assumes that we just have stone no equity also. All right, so Carlos says he's not c-betting 100% though. All right, so let's think about that. Let's go back and give him his range, the whole wide range he has, which I would not be opening, but he clearly is. Let's give him something like this. So which hands make sense not to continuation bet? All right, he's not going to continuation bet, in my mind, with weak pairs. He might bet weak pairs. He's not going to bet middle pair, so let's take these out. He's going to bet flush draws. He's going to bet top pairs, I imagine. So really, like, which hands is he actually going to check back? I mean, Carlos, give me some ideas. What do you think he's going to check back with in this spot? Because, like, pocket sixes he's going to bet, probably. I mean, we can assume he doesn't. Let's assume he doesn't have these. So if he's not betting these, what happens is now he's folding out. Well, let's just think about the hands he will bet. Let's just put filters next to the hands he will bet. He will bet no made hand. He will bet ace high. So now when he he's just missing an additional 20% of hands from his range. So he's still going to fold a pretty good amount of the time when facing the check raise. So yeah, interesting stuff. When looking at the filter percent on a check raise, do you include a buffer percent for floats? Well, I don't think many people are floating your check raise with just stone garbage. I'd be surprised if they are. But, I mean, maybe some people do. I mean, maybe people float here with Jack 10 of clubs, for example. Maybe so you would add in hands that stick around 2-card backdoor flush draws. But notice that that's only 6% of the range, right? So it's not actually... Oh, not Jack 10 of clubs. Jack 10 of hearts, I was saying. Silver's saying the point is that he doesn't give you a chance to check raise 20% of the time when he checks behind. And yeah, that's true, but you have to look at this scenario as this is the spot we are in. We are in this spot where now I have checked, this guy has bet, here we are. And we're not really looking at the spot of when it goes check, check, because that's not where we are at the moment. So when his continuation bet is 40 of 80, so he calls 50%. So yeah, what you're saying here is that he's betting less often, so his range should be stronger. He should be calling your check raise more often, mainly because these weak hands don't exist in the range. And that's true. Certainly true. We welcome. Yeah, you do shorten his range. So he goes from continuation betting 100% to 80%, and the range will be a little bit stronger. So what you can do is you can take out the hands he would check with. The issue here is, though, we have to start making some assumptions, because it seems like Zhang is opening very wide. So if he's opening very wide, I'm going to make the assumption that he is continuation betting very wide. So this is a spot where I really do think he may just continuation bet 100%, or very near 100%. Can we come up with an opening and continuation? I can't speak again. Can we come up with an opening range / c-betting strategy that isn't vulnerable to this any 2-card check raise? Well, yeah, you just start checking back a lot. You just stop continuation betting so often. Silverwing, thanks for being here. Have fun at the meeting. But yeah, I would definitely... Well, so thinking about this, what do we want our betting range to look like? We want our betting range to be hands that can continue versus the check raise sometimes. So that's going to be hands like not middle pair. We would definitely want to check middle pair. Top pair we can continue with. Pocket pairs below top pairs we're going to want to check. Middle pair we're going to want to check. Weak pairs, these garbage hands, we probably can bet these. Ace high, we probably want to check. No made hand, we can probably get away with betting these. Although some of these are deselected for some reason. Flush draws, we want to bet. All these draws we want to bet. So now, the betting range here is only 36% of the time. So, if we're only betting 36% of the time, notice that we'll fold out 11, 25. We'll fold out 25% of our betting range. Or no, we'll fold out 25% of the range to a check raise, which is more like... Is this 25? So 27% is garbage. These are deselected for some reason. I'm a little bit confused about what's happening here. Maybe someone can explain. Let's assume 26% of the time we have... What we have to do is we have to compare this percentage, which is 20, to this percentage down here on the bottom, which is 26. So we're going to have roughly half nuts and half garbage. Are we talking about the flop or the turn? We're talking about the flop. Notice here the turn is not even listed. What happened in this hand is Zhang opened under the gun 5-handed with ace-4. Dimitri called. Flop comes queen 7-3, 2 clubs. Dimitri checks, Zhang bets. Dimitri check raises with stone garbage. And we're trying to figure out, well, it was just shown that this is almost always going to be a very profitable check raise. So if that's the case, what can we do to make this not a very profitable check raise? And it's start checking back a lot of hands. And this is what a lot of the good players are doing. Remember I was talking about how Jungle Man does a lot of checking back with these marginal strength hands. And I think that's a good strategy. I think that's just what you kind of have to do if you want to be succeeding. You sure can't be betting everything. And in the past, betting everything was very strong because people never did this kind of thing. But now, here they are doing it. And it's hard to play against. Let's see if Zhang sticks around. We don't know if Zhang's going to stick around yet, I don't think. Maybe he shoves for all we know. That's something you could do. If you think they're check raising with a bunch of garbage, you could just start shoving everything. It's fun stuff. Well, you came at the right time. Yes, I stream. We've been streaming for a while. This is the 4th Global Poker League game we have started going over. My goal is to go through all of the games. This is a sit and go, effectively, so it's kind of like a multi-table tournament. If you have not seen the Global Poker League, I suggest you watch it. There's a lot of great content. Carlos says, and also don't c-bet all of your junk. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to c-bet all of the junk, for sure. Without using scripts, how can you plan a lot of tables and keep track of your opponents? Well, you got to use Hold'em Manager or something like that. I don't know if you call that a script. Let's slow down a little bit. Use Hold'em Manager or Poker Tracker. Those are fantastic. But yeah, you need to use a heads-up display. I know that if I try to go play an online session and Hold'em Manager is broken for the day or something because of some PokerStars update, I will just not play that day. I do not know how to play online poker without a heads-up display that's working well. And I mean, whenever I play online, I play like 20 tables at a time, and I just don't even know how to do it because I'm just constantly reading these numbers. That is what you have to go off of. So you have to play way fewer tables if you want to have a good ROI, or you can just play some game theory optimal strategy in your mind that's going to turn out some small return on investment. Let's see. If Zhang had king, queen, or ace, queen, do you think he'd check back that flop? No, absolutely not. I think he would for sure bet with that. I would be more interested if he had something like pocket tens or 8-7. Well, Carlos says he shouldn't have much junk in that spot in this field anyway, but he does, right? So given that he does, we have to see how that works. All right, so anyway, here we go. We'll continue moving forward. Raise from Davidi. Davidi's a little bit of a loose open. Going back to our pre-flop opening range chart from the cutoff, King 6 suited is on the cusp. So anything on the cusp I think is fine to open. Like anything like this, I would not fault you for. But still pretty aggressive. Also, you have Igor on the button. I would actually be a little bit tighter than normal. Zhang check calls flop. A little bit surprised at the check call on the flop. Did not expect that. I probably would just fold this flop, but he doesn't. Does the VD continue barreling here? If he bets turn, he needs to bet river. This is the same spot that I was discussing before, where your hand has no value. Your opponent can call a lot of marginal middle pair type hands, like 7-6, etc. So if you do bet the turn, you need to bet the river. And if you don't think the turn plus river bet is going to be profitable, then you probably just want to check, even with a draw. He gets there good enough on the river. I would definitely value bet now. So what are you trying to get called by? Always have to ask yourself, what is your opponent's range most likely, and what are you trying to get called by? So here we're trying to get called by a 10 or a 7 or a jack. So knowing that, we can't just bet huge unless you think your opponent's going to make some very loose call because of that. So I think you want to bet just kind of normal. Maybe a bet of about 2,700. He goes even smaller, so this is sort of an exploitative bet, I think. If you think your opponent's range is very weak, in theory you should bet very small. If your opponent is not going to be able to read into this at all. So maybe that's what he is assuming. I think against a good player, if he's against a good player, I think he probably wants to bet a little bit bigger here. But against this, perhaps a weaker player, he may want to bet smaller. Pocket jacks limps. Wow. Dimitri's doing some fun stuff. So how do we spell his name? Maybe we should Google him. We're not going to Google him. Everyone Google Dimitri if you feel like it. And he has had some ridiculous results over the last few years. I don't even know what his online results are. They're probably ridiculous as well. And he's doing some pretty sweet stuff. He's limping in a spot where I'm just virtually never limping. He check raised that flop with just stone garbage in a spot where I'm not doing that either. It makes me feel like a nitty old man. But I mean, it makes sense to limp here if you can keep your opponents in with a bunch of garbage. But I think I would probably just raise, given everyone calls raises every time pre-flop nowadays. Then he does a min bet on the flop. Kind of surprised at the min bet on the flop. But if you watch a lot of the good kids, they are betting very small in a lot of the spots now, with a wider range than you would typically expect because it's just a much smaller bet and risk way less. Yeah, interesting. Interesting hands. Maybe he wanted to keep Zhang in. That could have been an issue. Maybe he thought if I limp, I keep Zhang in the pot every time. I don't know anything about Walter. If Walter's kind of a weaker player, maybe he thinks if I'll slow down. Maybe he thinks if I limp, Walter sees a flop every time and I get to see a flop versus two weak players. Again, I know nothing about Walter. I mean, he could just be great. All right, so in this hand, Dimitri raises, and Davide elects to 3-bet the king jack from out of position. I think if you're going to 3-bet this, you want to be 3-betting a little bit bigger. Probably to 5,000 or so. Because when you make it this size, Dimitri can call very wide. And I think I would probably just call pre-flop with this. I think this is a good enough hand to call with. I'd probably be 3-betting weaker hands, like king 9 and king 8, and then some ace X's, if I felt like it. But I really don't have much of a 3-betting range here, especially given the stack sizes. Notice that in this scenario, Zhang is getting kind of short. You really don't want to go broke before him. Igor is also getting kind of short. So I think you don't really want to build the pot. I think you just want to play small pots here. I've been seeing a little bit more of this, where people are taking hands that I would typically call with in the big blind and then 3-bet them. One of my friends, Adam Geyer, was at the final table of a WPT that was on TV yesterday, or on Sunday, and he did this as well in a spot where something like button raised, and he 3-bet king jack offsuit in the big blind. And I'm rooming with him in just a week, so I'm gonna have to talk with him about some of these hands. Interesting check on the flop by Davide. This is one of these boards, though, that should hit Dimitri well enough. I was going to say let's play with Flopzilla on this one, but I actually don't really know what to do about Dimitri's range. His range could be very wide, or it could be somewhat snug. It's kind of tough to say. Maybe he doesn't even 4-bet his good hands, so maybe all the nuts are in his range. Maybe his range is only hands that are suited connectory and small pairs. It's tough to know. And this is why I think a lot of people get really obsessed over trying to nail down their opponent's exact range. But there's no way for us to know this. We can guess, but you have to realize your guesses are wrong a lot of the time. So you need to do a bunch of calculations where you look at just a suited connector and small pair range, a very, very wide range of stuff, etc., and see how all of that changes things. But I think I'm okay with this check on the flop, because Dimitri may even peel with a lot of ace highs, and then that's just a disaster because he's never folding. I mean, think about it like this, right? If Dimitri calls with every ace high, that means he's only folding hands like king queen, king jack, king 10. Queen jack may call. Jack 10's going to call. Queen 10 may call. Any 9's going to call. Any 8's going to call. Pocket 7's is going to call. 6's, any pair's going to call. So you can just kind of run through the filters that you see available on Flopzilla. Typically, I mean, this is not for this hand, but will he call with a set? Yes. Will he call a top pair? Yes. Will he call the overpair? Yes. So if you run through all these and the answer is just yes, 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 then you don't want to be betting with air, because that's not going to work out so well for you. Brewhouse says, Dimitri is kind of snug, but obviously plays some hands really different. I don't know if he's actually snug. Wee says, was looking at a frozen chart. Yes, if you're not seeing my face right now talking to you, you're not seeing the right chart. You're not seeing the right screen. Dimitri makes a small bet, again, sort of value / clean up the equity. I like that whenever it goes check on the turn. I'm not convinced Dimitri's tight. I'm just going to throw that out there. It seems like he's fighting for pots way harder than a lot of people, though, in interesting ways, which is pretty cool to see. So should Igor be trying to get it in? I would probably just call this, but I could see getting it in being fine. I think if you 3-bet it, you have to be willing to get it all in. You're certainly not trying to fold. Dimitri does call the 3-bets. I would probably fold versus this 3-bet from Igor with ace 9 suited exactly. These are pretty junky hands. Let's get out Flopzilla. Or no, let's get out Equilab for this one. Give us ace 9 suited. Poker Strategies Equilab is a free program that is pretty good. I mean, again, this goes back to like trying to figure out what Igor's doing. Like realistic hands that you want to get in with are going to be something like this. Maybe not even king queen suited, but he probably 3-bets king queen suited. So if this is the range, you see ace 9 suited is pretty junky in position. You really need Igor 3-betting just a bunch of garbage as well. If you start like adding in every ace X offsuit, maybe that might help. You see that bumps you up to pretty good equity. So if Igor is messing around, you can stick around. If Igor is not messing around, then you should probably be folding. And I would typically put Igor on the messing around range, so I guess folding's okay. Let's see. Rather than focusing on the villain's range, you should focus on what hero's doing with his different holdings. Well, yeah, I mean, you always want to ask yourself how you would play all of your various hands in this spot, and how do I want to fit those hands in various portions of my range. You don't really want to be thinking, I have ace-9 here, what do we do? You want to be thinking, what would I do with all of my range here? And see where you want to put that in. The Brewhouse, I have not seen anything from Dimitri that makes me think he's crazy, and nothing I've seen that made me think he's super tight. I guess he did, on the very first hand of the day, Igor raised under the gun with Queen 10, I think, and Dimitri folded King Jack from seconds. But I thought that was fine. So, I don't see anything that makes me think he's super tight. I think a lot of the players are just playing way better post-flop than is considered normal. They're fighting for pots way more. So they may be playing the same proportion of hands, but they're fighting for pots way more often. So here, Dimitri floats with the ace high. What is he doing? I mean, like, this is a spot that you just don't want to be in whenever you call pre-flop, right? But here we are. So now that we are here, I guess you have to stick around with this hand. Well, let's do some Flopzilla. I'm sitting here trying to figure out, like, how would we even go about doing this? All right, so let's put the flop up here. Flop is 8 of clubs, 7 of spades, 5 of diamonds. Hand is 9 of spades, 9 of hearts. What are we trying to figure out? We're trying to figure out, how do we even do this in this program? So let's see. We want to play from Dimitri's point of view. Let's play from Dimitri's point of view. So we have ace 9 of diamonds. We think Igor is going to raise pre-flop. Let's give him all the good hands. Oh, 5 of diamonds was a turn. You're right. 2 of diamonds on the flop. Let's give Igor all the good hands, which makes sense. Hands that he would want to get it in with. And then we have to make the guess of what Igor's also going to be 3-betting that I have a hard time doing because we don't know Igor. Can't really assume you know Igor. But let's assume he has a range. Let's just add some random ace X's to his range. Maybe we want to add some of these. Maybe what we do is we add just a few of the ace X's. Then we add just like a few sporadic offsuit hands like these. Maybe a few sporadic suited connectors, maybe even the weaker ones like these. Let's do this. This could be very wrong, and it is very wrong, but we have to guess in some way. All right, so which of these hands will he continuation bet on this flop? This is one of these spots where I imagine he's going to continuation bet a ton. So, what will he bet? Let's just assume he bets everything. If he bets everything, always look at how you're doing if he bets everything. What do we have in checking? Middle pair? It's not going to happen. So if he's betting everything, we only win 33% of the time. Well, so Silver Wing Poker, I'm not trying to add all of them. I initially had all of them listed, but then I got to thinking that he doesn't have all of them. He has, and he may not have any of them, right? We just want to kind of we want to kind of hit the combination of hands that he may be 3-betting as bluffs. Because it's likely only one of these sets of hands. Like, it's either a range of sort of like this that he's 3-betting, minus these two, and minus this. So maybe it's something like these. Or we subtract all of these, and it's just stuff like these hands. Or we subtract all these, and it's just all the ace X's. So we're not saying he's 3-betting all of these. We're just trying to figure out how are we doing versus the random, sporadic range that he may show up with. So yeah. I mean, we could do ace 5 and ace 4 if that makes you feel better about it. I don't think it makes much of a difference, really. So, versus this range, we see that ace 9 suited has about 40% equity, give or take a little bit, which is kind of cool if he continuation bets everything. What would he opt to check here on this flop? If he has ace 5 or ace 4, he's probably going to bet. If he has king high and queen high, he's probably going to bet. Ace queen, ace king, and ace jack may check. Maybe. Maybe these check. These will bet because they all have some equity. Yeah, it's hard to come up with much of a checking range here. the thing is here is Igor can justify betting with a lot of this just because he has all the nut hands in range. Maybe he's supposed to be checking stuff like these that he can check call with. No problem. Yeah, maybe he checks ace high here. I don't know. It's tough to say. You don't want to only be checking ace high. If you're checking only ace high, then you probably want to be checking aces and kings also. And I think that starts making the range pretty ugly. So yeah, interesting spot. So we're going to assume he bets all of it. I think he probably should just bet all of it here because it's nice and protected because he has all of these strong hands in the range. All right, so if he's betting 100%, we have 40% equity with the ace-9 suited. And whatever the pot bet was on the flop, we're in okay shape. So here we are. Now we find ourselves on the turn versus all of this. We get a turn 5 of diamonds. And Igor's probably going to shove if I had to guess. Maybe he checks, though. Or maybe he bets tiny. I don't know what Igor's going to do here. He does elect to check and elects to check call. So I like the check call here. Because if you shove, you're probably only going to be getting called with overpairs. So when he checks the turn, should we be... Oh, go back to this. When he checks the turn, should we be bluffing the ace-9 suited? And I think we probably should. If he's betting the ace highs on the flop, a lot of those are going to fold to a turn shove. So you clean up. You're making some worse hands fold. You always want to make sure whenever you are bluffing that some... I'm so tongue-twisted today. When you're betting with your bluffs, semi-bluffs included, you always want some better hands to fold. So will ace, king, ace, queen, and ace, jack fold? And the answer to that is yes. However, if we take those out of his pre-flop or his flop continuation betting range, if we take those out, now his range that he's left with is going to be his big pairs, which he's never folding, the sporadic suited connectors that he could have, like jack 8 suited or 10-7 suited, which I don't think he's going to fold. And then just some garbage ace-5 offsuit bluffs, maybe some queen-jack offsuit bluffs, which may not be in his range also. So this is a dicey spot for the ace-9 suited. I think you're... I mean, this is really why I think you should just fold this pre-flop. Because unless your opponent's just absolutely bonkers, I don't think you can very profitably play this. Interesting. Interesting, though, that he's doing it. So maybe it's good. Another interesting thing is that you assume all the kids who are crushing must be amazing. But there's probably also a lot of variance in poker to where they're probably doing a lot of stuff right and maybe some stuff wrong. And it's up to you to try to deduce which of those plays are right or wrong. Because they're not all right. You may think they're all right because they're crushing, but they could just easily be a lot wrong or whatever. I assume Dimitri's great, though. So we have to go into everything assuming that he is right and I am wrong. Because I am a dinosaur. All right, so here we have Zhang opening and then Walter 3-betting the ace-8 offsuit. This is what I was talking about earlier, where if you want to have bluffs here, I think it's fine. I mean, I think it's fine to raise small in this spot because you really should not have very many bluffs. Kind of interesting he's picking Zhang to attack here. I guess it's become clear to the players that Zhang's opening way too wide. So if he's opening way too wide, you can justify 3-betting him very often. But given he's a short stack, I kind of would have expected him to tighten up a bit. But clearly he's not. So, sweet hand to turn into a bluff, though. I think it's fine. Oh. Thing froze. Here we are. We're back. I mean, I think Zhang just has to fold in this spot, which is why the ace-8 bluff is so good, because if Zhang's opening a bunch of these ace-x garbage hands, he can't really defend too well at all. Which is why, again, I suggested he be a little bit tighter.